Alright, hey everyone, my name is Von Bismarck. I'm just going to show you a quick tutorial on getting CGAs into CRYENGINE 5.7 LTS. Now, just to give you a heads up, I am using 3ds Max 2021. This still applies to older versions of Max as long as you have the CRYENGINE exporter. I'm not going to go into details how to put that on Max, so hopefully you already know how to set all this up for CRYENGINE. And also another side note is that if you don't have Max, don't worry. You can still kind of do this. You just have to do it in a different method. And I'll go over that towards the end of the video. But for now, let's just jump into this. So right now I have a BF109. This is just something, a little thing I'm working on. I did not model this. I wish I remember who it was. I definitely should give them a shout out. I'll definitely put that in the description. But shout out to the person who made this model. I'm just a programmer, so me modeling is like I can just make boxes. But don't fret. I do know how to use Max at least. So with this process, is pretty straightforward. As you can see with this BF109 that I created, I set up everything pretty much ahead of time. But I just want to do an overview. So for this model, or for this vehicle, and that this applies to any vehicles, as you notice that I don't have tires. They're by themselves because it will be exported by themselves. But I do have these helpers, and these helpers are attached to the base mesh through the graph editor. So if you know how to use, go to graph editor. If you don't have a saved one, just hit new. It'll just make a new one for you. And as you can see, I have these nodes are attached to the landing gear, and the landing gear is a child of the mesh, and the mesh is the child of the root. So pretty straightforward. Same thing with the proxies. Prop proxy is the child of prop, and the BF109 proxy mesh is child of the mesh. And then I have these extra things called beacon light, particle position, pilot seat, and the rear wheel point. So all I'm trying to say is that make sure you break down your model, especially for things that are going to be animated, or I don't know, let's say your model blows up and you want some destruction. But just heads up, just try not to keep everything as you're in one mesh. I mean, if you have to, that's fine. But for things that will be animated or interacted with, just make sure you just break it up. It makes it a lot easier. But for this example, as you can see for this plane, I already done the animations, but that's pretty straightforward. So as you can see, prop, ailerons, flaps, elevators, and the tail, and the landing gear. I believe I did too. Yep, landing gear. So all that stuff has been animated. And for this process, it's just like we were just gonna export a CGF. So yeah, CGF. So just like geometry, you're just gonna make sure you have my material editor. As you can see, I have the main material and its submaterials, and everything's assigned appropriately. Now, when it comes to props, or in case you have a helicopter, when it comes to the rotor, there's a little extra step that you can do. I'm not doing it in this part, but you can, and all that is called the blur. So, and all that means is that let's say you have your rotor, or in my case a prop, right? And you have it, plus you have its own proxy. But what also you can do is create another object like the cylinder here, and this can be the blur. And all you have to do is just make it the same dimensions as your prop or your rotor, apply texture like a blur effect, of the rotor, and that's it. Make sure it's an alpha. There's some documentations on the CRYENGINE docs about what it kind of needs to be. And then all you need to do is just take your prop, attach it to that cylinder, and that's it. And then now you have two objects merged together. One is the blur, and then one is not the blur. And then in code, you can transition between the blur and non-blur. But I'm not going to go over that for right now. I'm just going to go over a little easy way that I do it. So I'm just going to hide the cylinder. Don't need it. So for this prop, what we're going to do is first one, let me make sure under my old projects, or BF109, let me go ahead and just delete the things I did before, because I took all this stuff from a project I had and then put this on a blank project so you guys can kind of follow along. Okay, so that's all set. All right, perfect. So what we're going to do is just go straight to exporting. So as you can see, I'm going to click on the root, and again, go back to Graph Editor. The root is the parent of all the children, right? I'm going to go to CRYENGINE Exporter. I'm going to add selected, so add the root, and then I'm going to select geometry, animated geometry, CGA. Now, the next part is seriously like big important. What you want to do, and I already did it here because I did this earlier, is that whatever your vehicle name is, and I believe it's case sensitive, I could be wrong on that, but whatever the name of your vehicle is, every other animation you export has to have the vehicle name first. So basically, for example, I'm going to export the main CGA, which is the BF109, right? I'm just going to call it BF109, that's it. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to export file per nodes. I'm going to ignore all this nonsense going on over here. I'm going to hit close. I'm going to launch my project. So I'm going to open up CRYENGINE, the sandbox. I'm going to go to the example level. And if I go to objects now, BF109 folder, as you can see, I have my BF109. And as you notice, it's not doing anything, right? It's just the model itself, like if it was an object file. And as you can tell, I made sure before I export it that I was on frame 0, right? I selected its parent. And if you don't have this root node, don't worry. If you just have the mesh and everything else are children, then just export the mesh. There's one caveat I do want to mention too, is that when it comes to CGAs, I had an issue with the proxies. And I noticed that it was because of the pivot points. So if you notice that you export a CGA and for some odd reason the proxy does not match what you have in Max, and it's going to match here if I show proxies. It's all blinking red, but you see everything matches. And the reason why it matches, and you might run into the issue where it doesn't for CGAs, is because the pivot points. And all I mean is that if you go to in Max, and I go to Effect Pivot Only, you see how it's here, and then on the base mesh, it's also there. Like they're they're in the same exact spot. So the proxy mesh will export properly as long as whatever it's parent to or whatever it's proxying to, they both share the same pivot point. I know that CGF's object ones don't have that issue, but for some reason CJ does. Don't know why, but that's just giving you a heads up. If you notice that when you export your CGA and the proxies are not aligned, double check the pivot point. Make sure that they're the same exact location. All right. So now we have the object, or now we have our animated object exported. Let's go to animation. The next important thing right now, I'm going to go ahead and select the prop. As you can see, I already have animations done, so I'm just going to delete these keys. And also, if you notice, I have 0 to 15. Now, you don't need to have 0 to 15. You can have 0 to 100, 0 to 1,000. Whatever you select for your keyframing, make sure your base mesh that you exported first, like our first export we just did, is on the same keyframe. So if you know that you might need more frames to do a door animation, then set the whole timeline to the most longest one you have. Okay. I believe that's what the documentation says. I could be wrong, but I'm just letting you know, just to make sure no one runs into any problems. If you export your main CGA under 15 frames, then do every animation in 15 frames. If you do 100, great. Do every animation in 100 frames. So to our prop, we're gonna go ahead and select auto key, and I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this keyframe. And on frame 0, I'm just gonna go ahead and set key. And then on frame 8, I'm gonna rotate clockwise 180. Well, let's get to 180. And as you notice, I have angle and percentage. I have these two on. And then on the last frame, I'm going to do 180 again. So one full revolution. So one whole full revolution. Now, you notice there's no frames in between, and I'm just gonna tell you right now, just go ahead and make the in between frames for this. I had an issue where if I didn't make the in between frames, the animation came out really wonky. So for frame 1, I'm just gonna go ahead and say set key, set key, set key, set key, and so on and so forth. We're just gonna set key for each one of these animations all the way until I get to 8. I'm gonna skip over 8 because it's done. Set key again, set key again, set key, and there we go. So we have all the keys set. We're back on frame 0. So the next important thing, under the motion tab, make sure rotation, I already have it, but make sure you have it set to TCB. And to do that, you just click on rotation, you click on assign controller, click on rotation, TCB rotation. This is very important. The documentation says to do this, so do it. So we hit OK. It sets TCB to rotation. It gives you this cool looking thing right here like that. You can mess with these values if you want. I just leave everything default. And then our next step is ready to go. So once we have TCB rotation selected for our prop, let's go ahead and go back to frame 0. Let's go to our exporting. We can go ahead and turn off auto key. And now we're going to clear the list, add selected, the prop, not the root, but the prop. We add that, and we're going to go now to animation for CGA. And don't hit export. Now we're going to do custom file name. Click that. And as you can see, it fills out it fills out our what we wrote in for the base. And all we need to do is don't erase that. We're just going to go underscore prop. All right. So what the CRYENGINE will see, it will say, oh, I see BF109, and now I see an underscore, and now I know this is an animation. If you don't do this, you're going to have a bad day. So make sure whatever your object is named, the base, right? So mine was BF109, but let's say you're doing a MH60, the Black Hawk helicopter, right? And you export the CGA as MH60. Well, all the animations that follow afterwards, like all the animations you'll make, will be MH60 underscore whatever the animation is called. So for mine's underscore prop, the next one will be underscore flaps, or so on and so forth. So hopefully you understand that, but just make sure the beginning name is the name of the object, the CGA, the main one. So we have BF109 underscore prop, save, export. Okay, and just to show you, I'm going to go ahead and click my flap, and that I didn't do keyframes here because actually it looks good. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as it is. I'm going to make sure under motion tab I have TCB rotation, which it does. Clear list, add selected, flaps left, CGA or dot anim, animation for CGA, custom file name. We have prop, and now we're going to make this one flap. Oh, not plus, sorry, underscore left. And I'm going to go ahead and export that and whatever. So we have those exported. And materials, I'm going to export this now too, actually. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my material selected. I'm up here on the highest, on the main submaterial. I'm not inside any of that. I have to be at the main. So we have that selected. It's all good. And then now I'm going to go to create material. Hit OK. Okay, there's my BF109. All the materials are set. Fantastic. And as you can see in our asset directory or asset browser, we have 2 animations. So now if I go to tools, animation character tool, there's a folder called BF109 already. It made this actually. And then you see BF109 CGA. So if I open this up, here's our plane. And if I go to prop, there it is, our prop animation. And if I go to flap left, there's our flap. And default is everything. So this is default. So default happened because when I exported the CGA, with all the animations already, because I already did this, it made a default. It just called it default because it just didn't have, there was no underscore after its name, which is fine because I'm not going to use default. It's just there. But I have flap left and prop. And as you notice too, I didn't use the blur material I was talking about earlier. And the reason why is because we can do things like this. And we don't need blur. So, and you can do this in code. And what I mean by that, let's go ahead and exit out of character tool. Go ahead and select our vehicle. You see it already selects it, it already put it as an animation mesh with a rigid body. Fantastic. If I say use raw animation name, okay, so it only shows default, and the reason why is because we need to restart the editor. So let's go ahead and save, close this down, and then reopen. So we're going to reopen the editor or sandbox, reopen our example, and the texture was lost for whatever reasons. Okay, whatever. So the material is a little bit wonky. Fix that later. So now, if I go back to here, it now shows prop. If I go to loop, and now if I just crank this up to like 3, voila. As you can see, bam, my prop is spinning as if it was fully like, you know, powered on. And if I lower that, I can even make it look like if it's, you know, trying to kick on. So just using the animation speed, I don't have to make any more new animations. I have one animation for this prop and that's it. And inside C++, even inside here in the editor or the sandbox, I mean, you can manipulate the animation speed. So it saves you a lot of time, so you don't have to keep making more and more animations. And you know, just it's a lot about trial and error. Like I noticed, for example, if I go back to Max, and you notice too is that the landing gear go up and then back down. Well, I want them just to go up, right? So I frame 8, and you can tell that too. You can tell in the system, hey, you know, stop at a certain point. And I believe you can do that in C++. But if you don't know how, then all you really need to do is do one animation of the landing gear going up, and you know, for in my case, if I did 0 to 15 with landing gear animation up, and then I export that, and then I'll export another animation from 0 to 15 of landing gear going down, and then to switch between them two. So you can do that too. Sky's the limit. So let's go back to, I want to show you another thing that you can do. So for those who have Blender, for the Blender folks out there, you won't be able to do CGA, but if you notice, you can actually do it like a character. And what I mean by that is, if you go back to Max, this is pretty much set up like a character rig, kind of. And all you need to do in Blender is set up, like, let's say you have this BF109, right? You create a bone called your root. You create your pelvis, which will control the entire, you know, model. You just, you know, paint weight, or just make sure it influences the entire model. And then you just add your extra bones to like little things like your ailerons or your flaps and so on and so forth. If it's a plane, if it's a vehicle, you do your doors. You know, you just create your own little rig. And then you just have it all skinned to it. You create your animations just like you would do a character. And then you export that as an FBX. You bring it into CRYENGINE and you import it like you would a character. And the great thing about CGAs is that it's technically like a skeleton file almost. So what I can do here is that I can say File, New Character, Objects. I'm just going to put it in the same folder and call it BF109. And then now I'm going to say skeleton is going to be the CGA. I hit OK, and as you can see, voila. And now, let me go ahead and switch back and forth really quick. Now I can decide attachments. So now I can do a joint attachment, and I can set it to pilot seat. You know, I can do, and make sure I call it that. I'm spelling things wrong right now. I don't know. Let's call it seat. So there we go. So seat, and then I can do another attachment, and I can say, and this is what I actually do too for my vehicles. I just do this. I create my CGA, I create the animations I need, and then I just make a character file of the CGA with all my attachment points. And then inside C++, I can just use the advanced animation component, or I can create an instance character of this, and then I can reference all the attachment points and then manipulate it in code. So I don't need to even, I don't even have to use the old CryEngine vehicle system from Game SDK. You don't even have to use it at all. Like, you don't have to do that. You can just do it this way, and it's actually a lot quicker and, in my opinion, more fun. So again, I can say, where's, okay, so landing gear wheel L. So, I can say wheel left, and then now in C++, I can say, hey, go to my character, reference this attachment point, and then plug in my my geometry of my wheel, and it'll put it right there. And I've done this before. I'm going to show you a quick example of that really quick. Let's see. Yep, I discard it. But just to recap before I show you something else, this is pretty straightforward and simple. We create our vehicle, in my instance is Max, 3ds Max. We create our nodes. You can create as many helper nodes as you need, but for when it comes to exporting, you just make sure you grab the root of your parent and you export that as a CGA. And like I said, and if I go to the folder, actually, let me bring up the folder, and as you can see inside the folder here, zoom in, BF109, there's the CDF, here's the CGA. Now the CGA is capital BF109, and the animations have the same first name as our CGA, and so on and so forth. So for every animation, that's the key point. The key takeaway is make sure whatever your CGA is, all your animations have that as his first name. So if it's Humvee, it's Humvee underscore whatever. If it's, my case, BF109, it's BF109 whatever for animations. The second biggest thing to remember too is that whatever you animate inside the motion, make sure TCB under assigned controllers, you have that assigned. Now you can animate everything you want, and then at the end of it, assign the TCB rotation for the assigned controllers. You can do that at the end, you can do it in the beginning, just make sure it has it on it. The documentation says it must have it, so make sure it does. And like I said, for the guys in Blender world, all you need to do is do the same exact stuff we're doing here, but just do it in a way like you're building a character. So you just create your character rig, but in our case, it would be like a vehicle rig. You skin it, you bring it in through FBX, and you bring it in the same way you bring in a character. So you can bring it in with the skeleton and then apply the skin, which will be the vehicle, and then you can, chop up your animations as you would do for a character. So either way works. And the great thing about using the character tool and making it a CDF is that now you can use the attachment points, and now you can do whatever you want. You can attach your character to the attachment point, you can attach your wheels, you can attach particle effects. The sky's the limit. It's fun. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to ask me on Discord. I'm always on the CryEngine Discord, CryEngine Discord. You can find me on there. I answer what I can. If you want more tutorials on stuff like this specifically, especially vehicles, I'll try to make more. Our game that we're working on deals with a lot of vehicles, so this is a lot of things I had to learn. Taking some stuff from the game SDK aspects, but this is kind of a whole cool way to doing it. It's a lot easier in my mind too. So don't fret if it doesn't work in the beginning. Just make sure if something goes wrong, like if the animation doesn't show, just restart the editor. Or if the animation looks funky, like I had an issue with the prop looking weird, but for some reason everything else looked fine. I just had to keyframe the in-betweens like I did here. So just go through the steps, make yourself a little checklist, and believe me, after the first time you do it, it becomes super fast, super easy. And there's a lot of cool things you can do via code to manipulate your CGA, or in our case, our CDF now. So have a great day. Oh wait, was I supposed to show you guys something? I don't know. I'll probably save that for the next video. But once again, you guys have a great day. Hope you enjoy this tutorial. If I miss anything, let me know. If you have any pointers, if you have anything to share, definitely share with everyone else. The more the merrier. So catch you guys later.